Hello, and welcome to this brief overview webinar of the 2020 Census and Count Me In curriculum and resources for schools. I'm Frank Peasy, Director of History Social Science Projects at the Sacramento County Office of Education, and it's my pleasure to bring you this information. Let's start with a background of the census. The census is the total count of the U.S. population that takes place every 10 years. Census data are used for a variety of purposes: to plan for healthcare, education, employment, transportation, critical infrastructure projects like building new schools or roads, healthcare facilities, and a variety of other purposes. It's also used to determine states' representation in Congress and to allocate federal funding for a variety of programs. Historically, children aged 0 to 5 are the most undercounted segment of the population, and this is for a variety of reasons, whether questions or concerns about immigration status, family living arrangements where more than one family might be in a given household, other financial concerns, or language barriers. If you're not able to access the census in your given language or understand messages about the language, you are far less likely to participate in the census. The impact of a low or incomplete count of census data are felt for years to come. From misallocated federal funds to an inaccurate representation of congressional districts, it truly is a social justice issue. So what's at stake for the 2020 census? Each individual counted in the census generates between $1,000 and $2,000 per year in resources and programs to their community. For example, a household of 5 would generate $10,000 per year in resources or programs, equating to $100,000 over the life of the census. Each year, $675 billion in federal funding is allocated out to the states based on the census. California's share of that is about $76 billion per year. Due to an undercount in the 2000 census, it's estimated that California lost $1.5 billion in funding for 8 programs alone. And on top of that, in this census, California could lose an existing congressional seat for the first time in its history. Given its diversity and vast geography, many places in California are hard to count. The map on the left depicts the response rate of the last census. The darker the red color on the map, the lower the response score. California is also a very linguistically diverse state. The map on the right shows that diversity, where the darker the green color, the more different languages are spoken in a given area. In California, our diversity is our strength, but that diversity does present some unique challenges in ensuring a complete count in the 2020 census. To address this, many strategies are in place. Enumerator instruments and paper questionnaires and other materials are all available in Spanish, as well as 12 other non-English languages. When someone goes to complete the census, they will be able to complete the census in their native language. Other items are available in 59 non-English languages, such as a language glossary and a language identification card, which will help staff to identify the correct translator. Additionally, many local efforts are happening. Every county has a local complete count committee who is partnering with grassroots organizations to really localize and tailor the census message. Enumerators are hired locally from the communities where they live, and that will help to ensure a complete count in any given community. Efforts to ensure a complete count in the 2020 census takes place in 4 distinct phases. First, the U.S. Census Bureau works in partnership with local government agencies to identify all addresses where people could live. Next, a nationwide communications and partnership campaign takes place, which provides people with information about the census, the uses of census data, and the importance of a complete count in an effort to increase participation. When it comes time to count the population, the focus is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. Encouraging people to use the online response option first, and making it easy for people to respond anytime and anywhere. People knocking on doors to complete the census will only take place when necessary. Finally, apportionment counts are delivered to the President by December 31st of 2020, and counts for redistricting are provided by April 1st of 2021. The focus is to make it easier for the public to get information. The 2020 census is a census like no other, with innovative programs to motivate people to respond and assure everyone that their data are secure, and efforts to make it easy to respond from any location at any time. The focus of this census is to ensure that everyone in the U.S. is counted. All residents who receive mail at their physical address will receive a postcard inviting them to participate in the census. Individuals who do not receive mail but have a P.O. box will not receive a postcard like this, but are encouraged to go online and input their address to be able to complete their census. So will a census enumerator come knocking on my door? You have 6 weeks to complete the census online, via a paper format, or over the phone. Beginning in mid-March, the invitation to respond will be sent to all households in the United States. Some households will receive a paper questionnaire if they're in an area that has low or no broadband access. After that, the following week, anybody who has not responded to the census will receive a reminder letter. The following week, if still no response to the census happens, a reminder postcard will come in the mail. That, the following week, will be followed up by another reminder letter and a paper questionnaire. At this point, you have the option of completing the census online, over the phone, or through that paper questionnaire. Finally, by the end of April, if no response to the census has been made, a final reminder postcard will be sent. Then and only then, starting in May, will enumerators come knocking on your door. Up until this point, you've learned about the census, how the census data are used, and hopefully the importance of a complete count in the census. Let's spend a little bit of time looking at the actual questions that are going to be asked on the 2020 census. First and foremost, there is no citizenship question on the 2020 census. The questions that you see on the screen are the questions that are asked. First and foremost, how many people are living or staying at your home on April 1st, 2020? Whether they're related to you or not, if there are multiple families living in the household, all we need is the number of people living or staying at your home on April 1st, 2020. Next, there's a question about whether the home is owned or rented. This is so the government can receive data and have statistics about mortgages and home ownership or rental rates. After that, the questions are about the individuals living in the home. There's a question about the sex of each person in their home, about the age of each person, the race, whether this person is Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin, and this helps the government to track certain programs that are specifically tied towards different cultural groups. And finally, a question about the relationship of each person in your home. Again, every person in a household should be counted. Remember, we want everyone to be counted once, only once, and in the right place. All census data, regardless of how they're reported, are protected by law. U.S. Code Title 13 is the most stringent privacy protection law in the land. The census is confidential, and it is required by law. Results of the census are reported in statistical format only, and one government agency cannot share any personal information with any other government agency around the census. All census employees swear to a lifetime oath to protect any information that they collect, and there are stringent penalties for wrongful disclosure of the census. In fact, all personal responses to the census are protected for 72 years. So 2020 census responses cannot be made public until the year 2092. The purpose of this webinar is to provide you some overview information of the census in an effort for you to become a trusted messenger and an ally and an advocate for a complete count. When thinking about the census, consider these questions. What challenges do you see ensuring a complete count in your community? What strategies or approaches should or might you take to address these challenges? And finally, what assets do you have in your community to help ensure a complete count? Through trusted messengers, we will be able to ensure that everybody has the right information about the census, and they will all become advocates for a complete count. One strategy to foster a better understanding of the importance of the 2020 census is the Count Me In campaign. In a partnership between the Sacramento County Office of Education, the Los Angeles County Office of Education, and the California Complete Count Committee, we've created a campaign designed to educate students and educators on the U.S. Census. Through a how-to guide and a series of inquiry modules, students discuss the historical importance of the census, the function of the census, the multiple uses of census data, the importance of a complete count, and ways to ensure that a complete count occurs through advocacy projects. The inquiry modules are designed for 5th, 8th, 11th, and 12th grade students. Let's start with the Tell Your Story how-to guide. This guide is for students to help them create an awareness and action campaign around the 2020 census. Walking them through a 5-step process, students will determine what their message about the census is, pick an audience, determine the purpose of that message, whether it be awareness or a call to action, the angle of that message, humorous, data and statistics, or personal stories, and then finally the best way to deliver the campaign. A multitude of media opportunities are available for students, and this guide helps them think through all of those different options. In addition to the Tell Your Story guide, we've worked with classroom teachers across the state to develop 18 inquiry modules about the census at the 5th, 8th, 11th, and 12th grade levels. These modules are designed to fit into the scope and sequence of the traditional course in a social science class, or an economics class, or a government class, and they're meant to help students with the understanding of the historical importance of the census and make those connections to today. Reflecting the latest research on effective teaching and learning, and supporting California's new History Social Science framework, all Count Me In modules were designed using the inquiry design model. Our classroom teachers who wrote these modules were trained in this model, and they chose content that was designed to engage students, that allowed for a depth of learning, and that could be seamlessly integrated into their normal course of instruction. The inquiry design model, or IDM, has 3 distinct phases. In the first phase, we frame the inquiry through a content angle that is compelling and through a question that asks students to consider all sides. Next, students wrestle with source material, both primary and secondary, to help answer this open-ended, compelling question. Finally, in finishing the inquiry, students take all that they've learned to create a summative task, ultimately coming up with a response to that original, compelling question. All Count Me In inquiry modules begin and end with a compelling question. These compelling questions have been designed to engage student curiosity, to help frame the inquiry, and to set up the summative task, to give students an opportunity to see the rigor of what they'll need to do to be able to respond to that question. Building their own body of research and resources, students respond to this compelling question through a series of more specific supporting questions. These supporting questions all deal with a specific source material or materials and are tied to a formative task. Through this task, students will be building their body of research that they will use to ultimately complete the summative task and address the compelling question. With this frame of reference, let's look at the specific grade level modules. In the 5th grade, there are 3 modules that students can study. The first, during the Great Compromise unit, asks students to wrestle with the compelling question, do all people deserve to be counted? Students will use data from the 1790 census to explore early plans for congressional representation and study how eventually the 3/5 compromise came to be. The second module, done during the Westward Expansion unit, asks students to consider, did those living in Western lands benefit from being counted? Students will write a newspaper article informing people why it is important to be counted. By studying census data and studying how the census works and studying the reasons for people moving to the Western lands, students will be able to write a compelling article. The last module asks students look at the question of, is it a waste of time to conduct a census? Students will study the modern census and then create a persuasive presentation urging people to participate in the census. The You Matter module is part of our Take Action module set. This module is more of a standalone, how the census works and what can you do about it type of module. We have 4 modules at the 5th, 8th, 11th, and 12th grade levels for this use. In 8th grade, there are 3 historical modules and 2 taking informed action inquiries. The first historical module, done during the Early Nation unit, has students consider how much can really change in 10 years. Students will compare the 1790 and 1800 censuses to better understand changes in the new nation. In the second module, students consider this question: was the Louisiana Purchase worth it? Students will use modern census data to help them understand population density and use that as a study of the Louisiana Purchase. The third historical module, around the Missouri Compromise, asks the compelling question, is compromise always fair? Using historical census data, students will study the state of slavery and the political difficulties it presented to adding new states to our nation. With the 2 informed action inquiries, students are considering how to develop a public service announcement on the topic of census. They also will use past census outreach campaigns as a model and develop their own campaign. In 11th grade U.S. history, there are 4 historical modules and 1 take action inquiry. As students study immigration and Americanization, they wrestle with the age-old question, is the U.S. a salad bowl or a melting pot? Students will use primary and secondary sources and the census to write a compelling response to this question. In studying post-war California, students look at the census to determine how population shifts after the war made California the most populous state. In a study of late 20th century immigration, students wrestle with the question of why it's vital for immigrant groups to continue to make themselves counted in the census. By studying the Immigration Act of 1965 and the census data from before and after that, students will be able to answer the compelling question. The last historical module deals with race and the census. Students will use sources and look at historical census questions around race to determine a response to that compelling question. In the Take Action inquiry, students will develop a project to promote participation in the census. There are 4 modules for 12th grade government and economics. As students study California's housing market, this module asks them to consider the question, how does census population data impact the supply and demand of housing in California? The next module asks students to wrestle with this: how does the U.S. Census impact society's economic health and its people? By using census data on poverty, students can create a claim as to the state of U.S. economic health and develop possible solutions. Though there is no citizenship question on the 2020 census, this module asks students to consider the arguments for and against. It may likely come up in the 2030 census, so this is a good way to have students look at what these arguments historically have been. The last module at this grade level is around representative federalism and the 2020 census. There are also 2 informed action inquiries that can be used both at the 11th and 12th grade levels. The first one, around federalism and the common good, has students present a civic action project to raise awareness of the census. And studying census participation in California, students will be asked to develop a project to promote participation in the 2020 census. All Count Me In modules are formatted the same way. When you open the document, an overview page gives you a nice view of what the whole module looks like. This example, a 5th grade example, has the compelling question at the top: did those living in Western lands benefit from being counted? From this, you can see the title of the lesson, the grade level, and the duration. Also, standards alignment is important. Here, the History Social Science standards, the English Language Arts standards, and the English Language Development standards are all listed. Then, looking at the supporting questions for each lesson within the inquiry, you see what the students will do each day of the module. So this module is a 5-day module, including that summative task. And so over the first 4 days of the module, you'll see the supporting questions that they will respond to and a description of the daily performance task and about how long it would take. Finally, the summative task at the bottom is what the students will actually do to respond to that overall compelling question. After the overview page, there is a lesson page for each day of the module. On this page, you will see the supporting question that's to be responded to, the estimated duration of time for students, the learning objective, and background information for you, the teacher. Each day has a short introductory activity that lasts 5 to 10 minutes, and the bulk of the time is spent in evaluating sources. The closing activity provides a way for students to cement their learning. An important feature of all Count Me In modules is that all of the resources that you need for students are included right in the document. For this day, students will read and analyze song lyrics. They will read an article about the life as a pioneer, and they will complete a graphic organizer of push and pull factors. All of these resources are included in your packet and can be easily run off and copied for your students. All Count Me In resources are digital. You can access the Google Drive with all of the modules and the how-to guide at bit.ly/2020 Census Inquiries. That's Census Inquiries with a capital C and capital I. You can also access them at the Content, Literacy, Inquiry, and Citizenship Project page at www.californiahss.org. Just click on the link at the top titled Census 2020. We hope this webinar has provided you with good information about the 2020 census, the importance of a complete count, and the resources that are available to help get the message out. For more information about this project, please contact Charlie Gilmore at the Sacramento County Office of Education, Dr. Michelle Herzog at the Los Angeles County Office of Education, or me, Frank Peasy, at the Sacramento County Office of Education. We'd like to thank the Sacramento County Office of Education, the Los Angeles County Office of Education, and the California Complete Count Committee for making this project possible.